Hey guys, I'm Coach Abby. I'm one of the owners of Abs Fitness, and today I want to talk about being an adult child of an alcoholics. So, a little bit of background on me. I come from two biological parents because I am adopted, who were both alcoholics. They met at an AA barn dance, and were also drug addicts. And what I would like to accomplish by talking to you today I would like to have people normalize talking about addictions. I would like to talk about normalizing talking to your children about regulating emotions, and my experiences. So I think, and I'm going to go into why this is important, because history does repeat itself, and it's important to really talk about addictions, to talk about your own personal experiences if you are a parent, and if you do have an addiction yourself, or if you were like myself, if you are an adult child of an alcoholic or an adult child of a drug addict. It's important to talk about these things and not to make them taboo, and not to stuff them away in that closet where we never have to talk about that again. Grandma's crazy, or auntie's crazy. I think it's important to talk about these things because history does repeat itself. So I was one of those people that thought I was invincible to my parents' genetics and my predisposed addictions, and I was not. And I myself am an alcoholic, and I'm going on 7 years of sobriety. So I definitely was young and dumb, and thought I was just college drinking. And I think that where we need to start is, like I said, talking to our kids, talking to our friends, our loved ones about our own personal experiences, but also teaching our kids at a young age how to regulate their emotions and to make them feel validated, and to give them a safe place to talk about emotions, because there's just so many different things that kids don't feel safe or comfortable talking to their parents about anymore. I'm going to give you an example. One of their friends does a line of cocaine in front of them. They're not comfortable with it, but they don't want to tell their mom or dad because they're afraid they can never hang out with that friend again, or they're afraid they're going to get that friend in trouble. But later on they have all this worry and guilt, and they're not really sure what to do with it. And eventually you are who you hang out with. So before you know it, your child keeps hanging out with little Johnny, who's 14, blowing lines of cocaine, and now your child's also doing cocaine. And they don't feel safe to talk to you about these things, and so, they end up having an addiction as well. So I think it's important to talk about these things and be really open and honest about addiction, drugs, alcohol at a very young age, and again, personal experiences. The thing is when I was young and really, really young, I didn't see as much the addictions. I knew that my mom and dad were sober, and I knew that they had stopped drinking, but I knew they had a pill addiction, and that was something I was very aware of. And I think so many parents think that their children aren't aware of these things, but I was very aware of my parents' pain pill addiction at the young age of 7. I think that's when I started to realize mommy and daddy were fighting over pills, mommy and daddy were beating each other up over it, choking each other out over the last pill. So it was now not just addictions, it was domestic violence entering the home because my parents were dealing with withdrawals to these pills. And then that later turned into, years down the road after being adopted and, reconnecting with my biological family, watching my parents then go through a really, really heavy drug addiction. And finding out through other family members, drugs were something that they also struggled with when they were younger. But at this point in time now, I'm older, I'm an adult, I can actually see what's going on, I can process things, and process that my parents are drug addicts. And that was just a very traumatizing experience, but it was a very eye-opening experience. And fortunately for me, I'm only had a problem with alcohol. I never ended up diving into any hard drugs. This last round, which ended up taking my mother, of drug addiction, really, really scared me. And not that I ever thought about doing hard drugs like that, but watching a loved one go through a heroin addiction and crack addiction, I really don't know how to say this plainly. It makes you sick. It makes you feel ashamed. And these are the type of emotions that I'm talking about that we need to normalize in our society, and normalize for people to be able to talk about. And I can say, as being an alcoholic, it is hard to hear these things. It's hard to be confronted by what others' perception of you are when you're under the influence of these drugs and alcohol. It's hard to face yourself after you've heard these people's experiences with you, but it's important to face the truth. And it's important to talk about these things because I think there's real growth in pain. And although it can be painful, you know, I myself am a very spiritual person, and I know that in the Bible, God tells me that, you know, once I make new, I never have to, you know, claim that old self anymore, you know. So yes, I'm an alcoholic, but I don't need to let those experiences of me cussing people out or acting a certain way that I'm embarrassed of or blacking out, like, that's not me, and I don't have to carry those memories with me anymore. And that wasn't something that was normalized. That wasn't something that was talked about in my family, and I think it should be, because that's where we see a lot of suicides. And this is a part where we can really, by normalizing emotions and normalizing sharing experiences like this, whether it's traumatic or painful or hard to share, that's where we can really prevent a lot of these suicides. A lot of people, they go through, while getting sober, having a really hard time looking in the mirror. And I myself went through that experience as well. It's hard, you're embarrassed. You go to a point where you're sober all the time. You're now remembering all the things that you did. And it's hard, it's embarrassing, it's shameful. You feel guilty, you feel sad, a new empathy comes, you know, you are finally gaining consciousness again. But what I wanted to accomplish by talking about all this today is, no matter how hard it is, whether you are the parent and you have a problem, and maybe you're not dealing with it anymore now, or you have a problem currently, or your child has a problem, we need to talk about these things. We need to talk about the hard truths. We need to put them on the table, because these are things that people are going through right now, and we're losing thousands of loved ones to drug epidemics, to alcohol addictions, to suicides, more than we ever have. So right now, it is important to talk about these hard truths. It's important to normalize, you know, sharing emotions, and teaching our kids and teaching our friends, and teaching, even sometimes you have to teach your parents, you know, how to really just share the hard truths and regulate their emotions. Because, you know, if you come from a family like I did, where, you know, talking about emotions wasn't really normalized, you don't really know how to regulate them. So I had no coping skills in my toolbox. My coping skill was alcohol, and I am not the only one. This is not the only face of someone who had no other coping skills except for alcohol. Other people out there, in fact, thousands, millions of Americans are dealing with the same exact issue right now. And this is something that we can control by starting to change this society and normalize talking about emotions, normalizing talking about mental health, and normalizing talking about addictions and not being embarrassed about it. And I think that's the hardest thing for most people, is embarrassment. So if that's you today, I ask that you please stand with me. That you stand, sorry, I felt like I just swallowed some dust. That you stand with me, and that you stand loud and you stand proud. If you're an addict, say that you're an addict. I'm an addict, but I'm sober. And today, I stand here in front of you guys, 7 years sober.